Name is DJ Eve, the queen of the weekend for what the Wonder Woman Chichi. Welcome to a segment we call Teenzin.com Hot Issues for Parents and Teenagers. And with me in the studio, his name is Coach Tafazwa. He's a life coach with over a decade of experience working with teenagers, preteens, and parents both in Zimbabwe and abroad. He leads an entertainment center and has a popular book, My Dating App. Good morning to you, Coach.
Good morning. How are you doing today?
I'm lovely, thank you. How are you doing?
I'm excellent.
So school's closed. Yeah. Hey. Now we're talking silent explosions today.
Yes, and today I would like to talk to teenagers out there who are listening, and I also want to talk to parents. So what are silent explosions? An explosion by nature is supposed to be loud and everyone is supposed to hear. But then when we say silent explosions, it means it's kind of a misnomer. And I want to start by explaining that. So I'll start by giving examples. You know, sometimes it's difficult to theorize and have people understand what you're actually trying to say. But then when there's a practical example, it quickly comes closer to home and you can understand. So some years ago, there was this teen. So he, something had happened at their house. He had lost, I think both parents or one parent, I don't quite remember. And then he had to go stay with the cousins. And then in that process, he wasn't like leaving as normal as he was at home. You know how it is. Sometimes you go join another family, you may not be that accepted, and things are now different at all. And then in the process, the cousin sister started approaching him and started making all the sexual advances towards him. And yet he is in their house, and there's obviously nobody he can tell. I mean, you can't go tell the cousin's mom or dad because you're guto and you need to be grateful for just being at that house. So she started making sexual advances. Cut the long story short, the cousin ended up sleeping with the boy who was also a cousin and was younger. So this would continue, and then he got to a point where now he wanted it to stop, but then he just didn't know how to stop it because there was no adult close in his life that you could just open up to. So this is an example of a silent explosion that I'm talking about. So what's happening in his heart, you know, it's more like a pressure cooker. You know, you don't see the pressure that's going on inside because from the outside everything else looks just okay and you don't think there's any problem. So he's going through all of this and he's having to deal with it alone because he can't like speak out. He can't talk to anyone. So there will come a point and a time where he will just explode. And even after exploding, the adults around him may not even see that something has happened. It will take maybe someone else from outside to actually point out and say, there's something there that's going on, there's something that has happened. So sometimes you then end up, I mean, I think it was a couple of weeks ago where I was reading in the newspaper about stories where teenagers took their lives, they committed suicide for one reason or the other. So we only get to realize that, an explosion has taken place when it gets fatal. But what we don't realize is there was a ticking time bomb all along. Something was happening, but they just couldn't like share it. They couldn't just take it out. I'll give another example, and I think I've given this before right here on radio, and for our regular listeners, they probably know the story. So there was one time a girl who was in a dating relationship, obviously under the parents' noses because it's generally not allowed. The boyfriend, they had an argument, an altercation with the boyfriend, and it was a very serious one. And then after that altercation, the boyfriend then drove away speedily, like he sped off. And in the process, he got involved in a fatal accident, and he died on the spot. And so the girl hears this, and obviously she starts blaming herself. I am the reason why this has happened. But this is something that you can't then tell to her parents. So she gets into depression because of this. And then obviously the parents are trying to find out, why are you so low, what's happening? And then she's making up stories. And when you make up stories, obviously the parents will see that this is not true and then will trash everything and trivialize everything and say, but she couldn't like say the actual truth because the truth is her boyfriend had died. But then how do you even say that when you were lying in the first place that you're not even dating? So that becomes a problem. So these are examples of what I call silent explosions because you're not anticipating it. It appeared as if everything was all right. There were no danger signs. There were no warning signs. But all of a sudden, there's then that explosion. So what happens is, if teens do not open up, then these explosions are going to find their own ways. I mean, these emotions are going to find their own ways of expression, their own ways of exploding. So think about the first example I gave. Maybe this teenager, because of the situation that they are in, they end up deciding to get into drugs because they're trying to numb the pain. They can't take it anymore. They're overwhelmed. They've got all these emotions. They're still living in the house. They have to face this cousin each and every single day, and they've got nobody to tell, to talk to. They're thinking in their minds that nobody's going to believe me. So because they have all this going on in their minds, they're going to look for an expression, and that expression may be drugs. And then somebody is deep into drugs, and you're wondering, why did you end up getting into this? Yet it was actually a result of something that was going on in their hearts. Sometimes they'll find good expression, maybe religion. Somebody leads them to Christ, and now they've got a way to like vent out what's been happening to them. But it's not always that they will find a positive way to express what's going on in their hearts. So as a result, they just explode. And a lot of times we are surprised as adults around. Sometimes we are surprised because those teenagers have been keeping these things as secrets and they didn't want to let out. But sometimes we are surprised because we were not observant enough, or we were just dismissing certain things. You know, we all know that teens are synonymous with mood swings.
Yeah.
They get emotional and all of that. But it's important to realize that there is a difference between the normal teenage emotional behavior and actually being anxious or being depressed, where you need to intervene. So how do you tell? Normally when you see that the feelings are prolonged, because if it's the normal teenage behavior, yes, mood swings in the house, but then a friend comes and then they're all happy, they're excited, they're laughing at all. But then if you see that their negative emotional state is now prolonged, it's now no longer just like intermittent, but it's actually continuing, then it means you may actually need to go in and intervene, to go in and help. So I've talked about a lot of this, what you call the silent explosions. There's suicide, which can actually happen, pregnancy. You know, it doesn't happen like in a second, in a split second, but you may discover it when it's maybe 6 months or 7 months, your daughter 7 months pregnant. What it means is all along, things have been boiling inside. And maybe there's a whole lot more that happened before they even got pregnant. And had it been that you were watching closely, had it been that you were looking out for warning signs, which are very subtle, obviously, because maybe they're trying to hide it, so they're very subtle, and you really need to pay more attention. Maybe if you had just paid attention, you would have seen that, oh, this is a ticking time bomb, and you would have had an opportunity to detonate it before it explodes. But now, because you're not paying attention, you only see it. Yato putika kudara. I've talked to parents, and they would be surprised or shocked when their child is maybe eventually chucked out of school, because the abattoir cheated something. Maybe they were vaping, or they beat someone or something like that. But normally those things do not just happen.
It starts from somewhere.
It starts from somewhere. There are things that would have been happening in the background, and had somebody looked into them, they could have been dealt with, and there wouldn't have been an explosion. You know, I remember one time this mom telling me about her son, who was very chilled, but just one moment, akabata munhu collar, like just lifted up another person by their collar, and wanted to punch them. And this is your like very chilled child who's no record of violence, who's never been involved in a fight. And obviously that behavior is pointing to something that's been happening inside them. Of course, we would look into teachers, but probably that's not the issue. Of course, he has an outlet, a reason at that moment for them to behave this way, but something has been bottled inside their hearts. Maybe you as parents, things are not well at home, you're always arguing, you're fighting, and your son is worried with what's going to happen. It looks like my parents are headed for a divorce, and when they divorce, what's going to happen to me, and all of that. And yet they can't come out to you and say, this is what I'm worried about. And so at the end of the day, something happens at school, just a minor thing, and they now express that anger. They now express that anxiety that's been in them through being violent to another child. So right now, I'll just talk a little bit about some of the reasons why teenagers keep things to themselves, and why you may only get to know about something when it is now reached the explosion stage. So I'll talk about some of the reasons here. So one of the reasons is that they are afraid of being judged. So and rightfully so, because as adults, normally we are judges. So they tell us something that's going on in their lives, or something that they have done. So maybe we start saying, munari honest, or you're cool, calm. Where is all of this coming from? So in saying that, that's judgment, and they don't want that judgment. They want to keep the good boy tag or good girl tag. So at the end of the day, they're just going to keep something to themselves because they don't want to be judged. And then the next thing is they do not want to disappoint you. So they feel like, oh, if my parents discover that this is what I've done, then they're going to be disappointed. I'm going to be a disappointment to the family. I'm going to disappoint my family. So I would rather abort than carry the pregnancy to term, because everyone is going to see that I'm pregnant, and my parents are going to be disappointed. And then the other reason is that they think that you will get angry, which you will do quite often. I mean, as parents, sometimes you scream, you shout, and this is what they're trying to avoid. So I would rather not make my parents angry, because if I make them angry, pamwe BP inokwira, pamwe mamango akastroke avakaita say, so let me just keep this to myself. Maybe I'm being abused, but the person who's abusing me is very close to the family, and if it's going to go out, then what's going to happen to my parents? Maybe they'll be disappointed, maybe they'll get angry, maybe BP inokwira, as I've said. And also, this happens to like all of us. Sometimes we have this exaggerated sense of compassion to my perpetrators. We feel like, if I report, or if I speak out, then someone is going to get into trouble. And what we don't realize is that that person actually deserve the trouble, or they deserve being cautioned, they deserve being punished. And it's not a bad way. Sometimes we're actually doing them a favor by reporting, because they're going to have an opportunity to be corrected when it's still early. So kana ari mwana ari kuita wrong behavior at school and they're reported, they will get an opportunity to be punished, and then that behavior that's wrong will be nipped in bud. But if they don't get an opportunity to be corrected, what it means is they're going to grow up and maybe they will be abusers when they are older, and they won't even realize that there's something wrong about their own behavior. So those are some of the reasons why teenagers won't open up. And I just want to talk to teens out there. You may be listening to me, and maybe you've got that one of those ticking time bombs that's in your heart, and any time you could explode. It could be an issue of even revenge porn. Yes, you made a mistake, you sent nudes, and now somebody's threatening you. If you don't do A, B, C, I'm going to leak this out, and you don't know what to do. It's important to speak out. When you speak out, you're going to feel lighter. When you speak out, you're going to have an opportunity to get perspectives from somebody else who may actually be older than you, and they will give you a solution. There are things that you would think, I've come to the end of the world, there is no way out. Yet if you share with somebody, you will get ideas, and you'll be able to actually come out of the trouble. So you may be out there and you're in that kind of a situation. Somebody's pressurizing you to do stuff that you do not like. Maybe you're in a dating relationship. Maybe it's even a friendship. And in that friendship, the friend is very toxic and is pushing you towards things that you're not comfortable with. You know, we've all been teens, and even as adults, sometimes you're made to feel guilty or bad about things that you value. You mean you haven't tried alcohol and all that? Yet, yeah, it's okay. You do your alcohol, I don't do it. And there's no reason why as a teen you should feel guilty about it. You must be assertive enough to say, no, this is not what I do. These are my values.